Have you ever noticed that the heaviest thing we carry after a failure is not the failure itself, but the imagined eyes of everyone watching? What if the shame you feel right now is not actually yours, but an illusion you have built in your own mind? If you have ever stumbled in the open, watched something you gave your heart to collapse while others looked on, and felt the crushing exhaustion of having to start over from ground zero, this is for you. Stay until the end, because the final lesson may change the way you see this pain forever. 1. The weight of other people's eyes. When we fall quietly, in the safety of our own privacy, we can gently tend to our wounds. We can grieve our losses in silence. But when we fail publicly, whether it is a business closing its doors, a very visible relationship coming to an end, a sudden job loss, or a dream that simply fell apart for all to see, a completely different kind of suffering takes root. We become paralyzed by the audience. We start to believe that everyone is watching, whispering, and keeping a permanent record of our mistakes. We replay the collapse over and over, not to extract wisdom from it, but to punish ourselves with the humiliation of being seen at our lowest. We freeze. We refuse to take a new step. We refuse to try again, because beginning again at the bottom feels like admitting total defeat to a world we think is constantly judging us. Buddhist wisdom teaches us about the fragile illusion of the ego. The ego is that protective layer within us that is absolutely terrified of looking foolish. It is the architect of our pride, the narrator of our success story, and it is the very thing that shatters so violently when we fall from grace. In Buddhist thought, much of our deepest suffering comes from our clinging to a crafted identity. We attach our self-worth to our reputation. We cling to the story of who we are supposed to be in the minds of other people. When that story breaks, we feel as though we ourselves are broken. But Buddhism reminds us of a liberating truth. The audience you are so afraid of is largely a creation of your own mind. Imagine you are standing on a dark stage. The spotlight is blinding. You trip, you fall hard onto the floor, and the sound of your failure echoes loudly in the dark. You lie there, paralyzed, terrified of the thousands of judging eyes. You feel piercing through the shadows. But then, the house lights slowly turn on. You look out into the vast rows of seats and realize the quiet truth. The theater is almost entirely empty. The few people who are scattered in the seats are looking down at their own hands, distracted by their own fears, nursing their own unseen wounds. You have been performing your shame for an empty room. In our modern lives, we carry this imaginary theater everywhere we go. A public mistake, a career setback, or a social failure makes us feel as though we are wearing a heavy sign broadcasting our inadequacy. We assume everyone in our circle is holding on to our failure, but they are not. They are too busy navigating their own rough waters to anchor themselves to your storm. Ask yourself right now, are you truly grieving the loss of your endeavor, or are you grieving the image of perfection you wanted the world to see? What are you still holding on to? What are you afraid will happen if you simply let the judgment go? Pause. Breathe. Notice the heaviness that tightens your chest when you think of what others might say. Observe the thought without following it. Let the feeling of embarrassment rise, but do not make it your permanent identity. It is just a cloud passing across the sky. Because peace is not found in perfectly proving the crowd wrong. Peace is found in realizing the crowd was never really there. You are allowed to fall. You are allowed to be seen falling. But stepping away from the imaginary audience is only the first step, and this is where the next truth begins. Because beneath the fear of being judged lies an even deeper trap. A trap that keeps us from ever moving forward. 2. The illusion of where you should be. What if your greatest pain is not the reality of where you are, but the ghost of where you thought you would be? Here is a truth that is deeply uncomfortable to accept. We do not just suffer because we fell. We suffer because we refuse to accept the ground we landed on. When you experience a public failure, the hardest part is often the agonizing comparison between the life you are living right now and the blueprint of the life you meticulously planned. You look around and realize you are starting from zero. You see others moving forward, hitting milestones, coasting on the momentum of their own lives, while you feel trapped in the wreckage of yours. You feel profoundly behind. You feel that you should be further along, that you should have figured this out by now. You spend all your emotional energy fighting the reality of your own starting line. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is the teaching of non-resistance. In Buddhist thought, suffering is simply the gap between reality and our expectations. When we cling tightly to a specific timeline or a certain status, we create our own misery. We forget the universal law of impermanence, the truth that all things rise and fall, that nothing is fixed, and that no position in life is forever guaranteed. By refusing to accept that our previous chapter has ended, we blind ourselves to the reality of the present moment. Imagine a traveler standing in the middle of a dense, unfamiliar forest. They are holding an old map that says they should be standing on the sunlit summit of a grand mountain. They look at the map, then look at the thick trees surrounding them, and they become angry. They refuse to walk. They sit in the dirt, cursing the forest, demanding to be on the mountain. But their anger does not change the trees. Their resistance does not magically transport them to the peak. Refusing to acknowledge the forest only ensures that they will remain lost in the dark. We do this in our modern lives every day. We lose a business, we fail at a public endeavor, or our carefully built reputation takes a hit. And instead of navigating our new reality, we sit in the dirt holding the old map. We stare at our peers, we scroll through the curated successes of others, and we let the quiet poison of comparison convince us that our journey is permanently ruined. We feel the heavy pressure to succeed, clinging to a timeline we created when we were younger, before life humbled us. Ask yourself right now, think about your own life. Who told you that you had to be at the top of the mountain today? Are you truly angry at your current situation, or are you mourning a timeline that never actually existed? Is fighting this reality bringing you peace, or is it feeding your fear? Pause, breathe, let the timeline go. Look down at where your feet are planted right now. Acknowledge the ground, even if it is rocky. Stop demanding that the scenery change before you take a step. Let the feeling of being behind rise and pass without making it your absolute truth, because true dignity is not found in never falling. It is found in looking at the rubble, accepting it without hatred, and choosing to stand anyway. Let life meet you exactly where you are. But letting go of the map is just one piece of the puzzle, and this is where the next truth begins. Because when the things we built are completely stripped away, we are forced to confront something far more terrifying, the fragile reflection of who we thought we were. 3. The broken mirror of identity. What if the hardest part of losing everything is not the loss itself, but realizing you no longer know who you are without it? Here is a truth that leaves many of us feeling entirely unmoored. When we experience a massive public failure, we do not just lose a business, a relationship, or a carefully built project. We lose the character we were playing. For years, you may have been the successful entrepreneur, the reliable provider, the brilliant creator, or the person who always had their life together. You wore that title like armor. But when the failure happens for everyone to see, that armor is violently stripped away. You are left standing in the cold, feeling completely hollow. You look in the mirror and realize you do not know how to exist without the label that just dissolved. Buddhist wisdom teaches that one of the greatest causes of human suffering is our attachment to a fixed identity. We mistakenly believe that we are our jobs, our achievements, or our social standing. But in Buddhist thought, the self we try so desperately to protect is not a permanent structure. It is constantly changing. When we cling tightly to a temporary role, we set ourselves up for absolute devastation when that role naturally comes to an end. Imagine a quiet lake at midnight, perfectly reflecting the bright, luminous moon. The reflection on the surface is clear, sharp, and beautiful, but suddenly a violent storm rolls in. The wind howls, and the water is whipped into a frenzy of dark, chaotic waves. The perfect reflection of the moon is shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces of light. If you believed the reflection was the moon itself, you would be heartbroken, thinking the moon had been permanently destroyed. But the true moon is still up in the quiet sky, completely untouched by the storm below. The broken reflection on the water was never the real thing. In our modern lives, we constantly confuse the reflection with reality. We mistake our career milestones, our online presence, and the praise of our peers for our actual worth. When a public failure hits, the waters of our life become incredibly turbulent. The image we projected to the world breaks apart. We panic. We scramble to pick up the pieces, terrified that our very core has been destroyed. We feel emotionally exhausted trying to prove to the world that we are still the successful person we used to be. Think about your own life. Who are you when the title is taken away? Are you mourning the loss of your true self, or just the loss of a role you were playing for the world? What are you afraid you will find in the quiet, empty space beneath your achievements? Pause. Breathe. Do not rush to build a new identity just to feel safe. Observe the emptiness without rushing to fill it. Stop trying to piece the broken reflection back together. Let the feeling of being stripped bare rise, and realize that in this emptiness, there is an unexpected freedom. You are not your successes, and you are certainly not your public failures. You are the quiet sky observing the storm. Because peace is not found in building a stronger armor. It is found in realizing you never needed the armor in the first place. But accepting this emptiness can feel like standing alone in a vast wasteland. And this is where the next truth begins. Because true strength is not about rushing to rebuild the exact same towering structure. It is about learning to find dignity in the ashes. 4. The quiet dignity of ground zero. What if hitting the absolute bottom is not a punishment, but a profound clearing of the ground? Here is the truth few people want to face. We are terrified of ground zero. When a massive failure happens and everything we have built collapses, we look at the wreckage around us with intense shame. We view starting over not as a new beginning, but as a humiliating demotion. We look at our empty hands and feel an overwhelming sense of defeat. The thought of taking small, basic steps again after being so far ahead feels completely agonizing. We want to close our eyes, wave a magic wand, and skip the rebuilding phase entirely. We fight the reality of the rubble. Buddhism teaches the profound power of acceptance and the beauty of the beginner's mind. When our cup is entirely full of old assumptions, pride, and rigid expectations, nothing new can be poured in. But when the cup is emptied, even against our will, we are finally forced into absolute presence. In Buddhist thought, there is no shame in the present moment, no matter how bare it looks. Shame only exists when we compare the present moment to the past. Imagine an ancient forest that has just been swept by a devastating fire. From the outside, it looks entirely ruined. The tall, majestic trees have been reduced to blackened stumps. The landscape is covered in silent grey ash. It looks like the end of the world. But deep beneath the soil, a miracle is happening. The thick canopy of leaves that used to block the sky is gone, allowing warm sunlight to finally touch the forest floor for the first time in decades. The ash is quietly returning vital nutrients back into the earth. Seeds that had been trapped in the dark for years are finally given the space, the light, and the nourishment they need to break open. The fire was not just an ending, it was a brutal, necessary clearing. In our modern lives, a public failure is that fire. You close a business, you lose your savings, you move back into a tiny room, or you step away from a public life in disgrace. You feel completely leveled. You think you are standing in a barren wasteland, but the truth is, the heavy, exhausting canopy of maintaining your old life is finally gone. You are no longer spending all your energy trying to hold up a collapsing structure. The pressure to maintain the illusion has burned away. In this quiet, empty space, the sunlight can finally reach the ground. You are free to move without the suffocating weight of past expectations. Ask yourself right now, look at the empty space in your life. What if this is not a graveyard, but a fresh foundation? What new direction is trying to grow in the quiet space that your old, loud life was crowding out? Is it possible that losing what you had was the only way to find what you actually need? Pause, breathe, stand quietly in the center of your own life. Stop trying to sweep away the ashes so quickly. Do not rush to plant the exact same trees that just burned down. Let the stillness settle around you. Because dignity does not only belong to those standing triumphantly on the peak. True dignity belongs to those who learn to stand in the rubble, look at the reality of their life without flinching, and simply take one breath. But finding peace at ground zero requires you to let go of the ghosts in the room. And this is where the next truth begins. Because before you can rebuild, you must stop trying to explain your fall to the people who are no longer there. What if the most exhausting part of failing is not the failure itself, but the endless rehearsals in your mind trying to explain why it happened? Here is a truth we rarely admit. Long after a public defeat, our minds remain trapped on an imaginary witness stand. We imagine what our former colleagues, distant friends, or casual observers are saying about our collapse. We write long, elaborate speeches in the shower to defend our honor. We replay conversations and try to justify our mistakes to people who are not even in the room. We burn our precious energy trying to control how our story is being told by others. We are terrified of being entirely misunderstood, so we mentally fight back. We try to force the world to see our good intentions. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that suffering multiplies when we try to control what is fundamentally out of our hands. We cannot control the thoughts of others. In Buddhist thought, true peace comes from non-attachment, not just to objects or status, but to the opinions of the world. When we desperately cling to the need to be validated, when we demand that others view us correctly, we hand over our inner peace to people who are simply walking by. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, rocky canyon. You are upset, so you shout into the canyon, trying to explain yourself. A moment later, your words echo back to you, slightly distorted. You do not like how the echo sounds, so you shout louder to correct it. The canyon shouts back even louder. You become angry, completely exhausted, screaming into the void to fix the misunderstanding. But the canyon is just empty rock. The echo is simply your own anxiety bouncing back. The only way to stop the noise, the only way to find absolute quiet, is to simply stop shouting. In our modern lives, we do this constantly. We craft the perfect social media post to subtly explain our setback. We agonize over the people who ignored us when we fell, holding on to their silence as a deep, personal betrayal. We let the echo of our own overthinking convince us that we still need to fight for our reputation. But the people you are arguing with in your mind have already moved on to their own lives. You are just screaming into the canyon. Ask yourself right now, who are you still trying to convince? What are you afraid will happen if you simply let them misunderstand you? Is your desperate need to explain yourself robbing you of the vital energy you need to actually rebuild your life? Pause, breathe. Let the urge to defend yourself rise, and then observe it without acting on it. Stop trying to control the narrative. You do not have to chase what is already leaving. Give yourself the profound gift of silence. Let them think what they want to think. You no longer have to perform for them, because peace is not found in winning the argument. It is found in finally leaving the room. But once the room is entirely quiet, and the audience is truly gone, the real work of beginning again takes place. And this is where the next truth begins. Because true transformation does not happen in the warm spotlight. It happens completely out of sight. 6. The wisdom of the seed in darkness. What if the quiet, unseen isolation you are feeling right now is not a burial, but a planting? Here is a truth that is incredibly difficult to accept when you are hurting. After a public failure, the immediate aftermath is often absolute, deafening silence. The phone stops ringing, the invitations stop coming, the spotlight quickly moves away to find someone else. We feel completely forgotten. We feel buried under the heavy weight of our own collapse. In our fast-paced world, we equate being unseen with being entirely worthless. We panic in this quiet void. We rush to make noise, to post an update, to launch a new project, simply to prove to a distracted world that we are still alive. Buddhist wisdom teaches the profound value of stillness and obscurity. We live in a society that worships the bloom, the visible success, the final product, the loud victory. But in Buddhist thought, nothing in nature blooms constantly. There are necessary seasons of retreat. There are periods of dormancy where nothing appears to be happening on the surface. True, enduring growth requires the dark. It requires withdrawing your precious energy from the external world and pulling it deep down into the roots. Imagine a small seed buried deep beneath heavy, cold soil. It is completely surrounded by darkness. It is entirely alone. If the seed had a mind, it might feel terrified, believing it had been discarded, buried alive, and forgotten by the sunlit world above. It might panic and try to push upward before it is ready, desperately seeking the light. But the soil is not a tomb. It is an incubator. In that silent, unseen darkness, the seed must break open. It must anchor its roots deep into the dirt long before a single fragile shoot ever breaches the surface. Without the darkness, there is no root. Without the root, the plant will never survive the fierce winds above. In our modern lives, a public failure forcefully pushes us into the dark dirt. You step away from a failed venture, you retreat from a broken relationship, or you quietly clock out of a career that fell apart. You feel the heavy pressure of isolation all around you. You watch others blooming brightly in the sun, and you feel the frantic, exhausting urge to announce a massive comeback. You want to prove you are not dead yet. But rushing back to the surface before you have healed is like a seed trying to sprout without roots. The moment the wind blows, you will simply fall over again. The isolation you feel right now is not a punishment. It is the exact environment you need to figure out who you actually are without the applause. Ask yourself right now, are you trying to rush your comeback just to escape the discomfort of the quiet? Are you making noise because you are ready, or because you are terrified of being forgotten? What if this forced isolation is exactly the quiet space your spirit has been desperately begging for? Pause, breathe, sink into the quiet. Stop trying to prove your existence to the world right now. Let go of the need to be visible. Allow yourself to be entirely unobserved. Give yourself permission to rest in the dirt for as long as it takes. Because true transformation does not happen when everyone is watching. It happens in the unseen moments when you choose to keep breathing in the dark. But staying in the dark eventually forces you to face the one person you have been hiding from. And this is where the next truth begins. Because the world has already moved on, but you are still quietly punishing yourself. 7. Forgiving your own humiliation. What if the most dangerous enemy you face after a failure is not the judgment of the world, but your own memory? Here is a difficult truth we rarely want to admit. The crowd has gone home, the dust has completely settled, but you are still quietly replaying the tape of your own collapse. After a public failure, long after the actual consequences have been paid, we carry the heavy ghost of humiliation. We replay the awkward conversations, the failed launch, the desperate attempts to fix things, or the final moments of a broken dream. We look back at our past confidence and we cringe. We feel a deep, burning shame for having tried and failed. We quietly punish ourselves, keeping the memory painfully fresh, secretly believing that if we hurt ourselves enough, we will somehow make up for the mistake. Buddhist wisdom teaches the profound necessity of compassion, and this compassion must include yourself. In Buddhist thought, the person who made that mistake in the past no longer exists. They acted based on the awareness, the fears, and the limited tools they had in that exact moment. To hold your present self hostage for the actions of a past self is to deny the fundamental truth of impermanence. You are constantly changing. The fact that you can look back and see the error means you have already grown beyond it. Imagine a traveler who survived the collapse of their own home. From the wreckage, they pick up a heavy, jagged stone. They carry this sharp stone with them everywhere they go, holding it so tightly that their hands constantly bleed. They refuse to put it down, believing that carrying this heavy pain is their rightful punishment for letting the house fall. But holding the stone does not rebuild the house. It does not turn back time. It only ensures that their hands are too damaged to ever build anything new. In our modern lives, we hold on to our humiliation exactly like that sharp stone. We lie awake at night, letting the burning sensation of embarrassment wash over us. We scroll through old emails, obsess over past decisions, and refuse to forgive ourselves for taking a blind risk, trusting the wrong person, or simply failing for all to see. We think this self-flagellation is a form of accountability. We think it keeps us safe from making another mistake, but it only keeps us paralyzed in the past. Ask yourself right now, how many times do you need to replay your own fall? Are you punishing yourself to extract a lesson, or simply because you believe you do not deserve peace? What would happen if you finally set the heavy stone down? Pause, breathe. Look at the memory of your failure without turning away. Acknowledge the pain, and then gently release it. You have paid the price. You have suffered enough. You do not need to keep paying the debt every single day. Stop whipping yourself for a storm that has already passed. Forgive the past version of yourself who simply did not know what you know now, because true dignity is not about having a flawless past. It is about treating your own broken pieces with the quiet grace you would offer a friend. But once you finally forgive yourself and the heavy stone is dropped, a strange and wonderful lightness begins to emerge. And this is where the next truth begins. Because when the worst has already happened and everything you were trying to protect is gone, you discover a radical new freedom. 8. The freedom of having nothing left to prove. What if the exact moment you lose everything is the exact moment you become entirely free? Here is a truth we rarely see while we are still falling. We spend the vast majority of our lives completely exhausted. We hustle, we build, we perform, and we constantly curate our lives to uphold a certain image. We desperately want to be seen as successful, capable, and unshakable. When a massive public failure strips all of that away, we think we have lost everything of value. We stare at our empty hands and feel profound despair. But what we often fail to realize is that we did not just lose our success. We also lost the heavy, suffocating burden of having to constantly prove our worth to the world. Buddhist wisdom teaches us about the immense relief of non-attachment. We spend our lives deeply attached to the heavy masks we wear, terrified that they might slip. But in Buddhist thought, The ego is a demanding master that requires constant feeding. It requires endless defense. When your carefully built reputation collapses, the ego starves. At first, this feels like an unbearable tragedy, but beneath the pain lies an incredible liberation. You no longer have to defend a phantom. The worst has already happened, and you are still here. Imagine a warrior who has spent his entire life wearing a massive, gleaming suit of armor. He polishes it meticulously every single day. He wears it everywhere he goes, never taking it off. The armor is incredibly heavy. It aches his shoulders, blisters his skin, and makes it desperately hard to breathe. But he believes the armor is who he is. One day, a violent event shatters the suit into pieces. At first, the warrior is absolutely terrified. He feels exposed and entirely vulnerable to the world. But as he slowly stands up from the dirt, he notices something he has not felt in decades. He feels the cool wind on his skin. He can walk without dragging heavy metal. He can finally take a deep, full breath. The destruction of his armor was not his end. It was the beginning of his freedom. In our modern lives, we wear our job titles, our financial status, and our public reputations exactly like that heavy armor. When a public failure shatters it, we mourn the metal. We feel entirely naked and terrified of being seen as ordinary. But look closely at the space you are in right now. You no longer have to exhaust yourself keeping up appearances. You do not have to pretend everything is perfect. You do not have to fear the inevitable fall anymore, because you have already hit the ground. The secret, unspoken relief of a public failure is that the terrible anticipation is finally over. Ask yourself right now, what if losing your status was the only way to finally get your life back? Who are you when you stop trying to impress absolutely anyone? Are you still mourning the heavy armor, or are you ready to feel the wind? Pause, breathe. Feel the profound lightness of having nothing left to hide. Stop trying to frantically gather the broken pieces of metal to rebuild the heavy suit. You do not need to perform anymore. Let the immense relief wash over you. You are allowed to be quiet. You are allowed to be a beginner. You are free from the exhausting full-time job of being perfect. Because peace is not found in being entirely invincible. It is found in realizing you have absolutely nothing left to protect. But once the armor is gone, and the ground is completely clear, there is only one thing left to do. And this is where the final truth begins. Because staring at the empty path is not enough. Eventually, you have to walk. 9. The first step is the only step. What if the entire journey back to yourself is not 1,000 miles, but simply the distance of a single breath? We began this journey by looking at the terrifying weight of the imagined audience. We talked about the deep exhaustion of clinging to a map that no longer matches the territory, and the pain of staring at the shattered mirror of your old identity. When a public failure strips away everything you have built, the hardest battle is not the failure itself. The hardest battle is accepting the quiet reality of ground zero. We think we must rebuild the entire towering structure immediately. We want to skip the awkwardness of the beginning. We want to prove to the world that we are already back on top. But trying to leap from the bottom of the valley straight to the peak only guarantees another fall. Buddhist wisdom brings us back to the only place where life actually happens, the absolute present moment. You cannot heal in the past. You cannot walk in the future. The crushing anxiety you feel about starting over comes from trying to live in a chapter that has not yet been written. In Buddhist thought, the path is never the whole staircase. The path is just the step directly beneath your foot. Imagine a traveler standing at the very beginning of a long, misty road. They have lost everything in a storm and must find their way to a new home. They look far into the distance, trying to see the end of the road, but the fog is too thick. If they focus on how many hundreds of miles lie ahead, they will collapse in despair. They will sit in the dirt and refuse to walk. But they do not need to see the end of the road. They only need to see the single patch of dirt directly in front of their boots. They take one step, then another, and with every quiet step, the fog naturally parts just enough to reveal the next. In your own life, you do not need a grand, sweeping master plan for your redemption. You do not need to announce a massive comeback to the people who watched you fall. The heavy armor is gone. The loud performance is over. You are finally alone with yourself. All you have to do now is look at the ground beneath you, accept it with profound dignity, and decide what the next small, quiet step looks like. You are no longer a prisoner to the opinions of others. You are the quiet sky. You are the seed resting patiently in the dark. You are the deep, still water beneath the storm. You have lost the heavy illusion, but you have found your true self. Pause. Breathe. Trust the empty space you are standing in. You do not have to conquer everything today. Just do the next small thing. Wash the dishes. Make the phone call. Take the walk. Rebuild your life quietly, piece by small piece, not for the applause of the crowd, but for the profound peace of your own spirit. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. Let life meet you exactly where you are.